Mzwandile Mbeje, thank you very much indeed for your time. You must be tired. We're just jetting in from China, but we appreciate your time to unpack this. Let me be direct, Mzwai. A state visit to China, how are South Africans going to benefit?
Thank you very much, Blaine. Of course, every state visit must benefit ordinary South Africans because other than that, so there's no point of any state visit. There were a few agreements that were signed in trade, in climate change, in science and technology, in vocational training, so around those areas. So basically, there will be an uptake as part of a bigger China's drive to really interact with Africa. You remember even during FOCAC, they said that they will be offering scholarships of something like 50,000 to African students, and of course that includes South African students. So basically what's happening is that they are upping the trade levels between these two countries. And this visit, as we've been saying all along, so was reciprocating that visit of China's president over a little month ago. And you remember during that visit, China committed $14.7 billion to this country. So to go to a number of projects, automobile. So you can see that's the kind of relationship that is developing, and it will really help towards building infrastructure and creating a proper investment climate, and then people can be able to then find employment.
Well, China is seemingly very generous, isn't it? Apart from their investments on the continent, this line of credit that they're offering the countries on the African continent seems to be stretching. But in terms of the debt, what risks are there for African countries?
I think that's one of the questions, Blaine, that we actually were very interested in to say. I mean, China seems to be very generous. So what's it in for China? But I think as these meetings happen, they are basically saying they want to help a friend. They want to help a continent that wants to develop. For example, some of the poorer countries on the African continent identified, so the debt that they're having with China will be written off. Because what China is basically doing, it's giving skills, it's giving these resources, but of course it also benefits because a lot of raw materials it takes from here. So that is why all the time they talk about a win-win situation. I come here, I build the infrastructure, but then I take some of the raw materials because I also need to develop my own economy. So the question is that balance? That is where we need to interrogate this.
But did you get a sense that there is now a drive from African countries to say, let's export more finished goods to China rather than raw materials?
Absolutely. And even the Chinese president himself on the public platform said, given the kind of the relationship that now exists, African countries can now export what he calls non-resourced products. So which means if our manufacturing is up to scratch, so there is a market there. I mean, when we talk about China, you're talking about 1.4 billion people. That's a huge market. So if we really get our house in order as Africa, as South Africa, so here is the market. So it's opening up. So already, by the way, South Africa is already making good progress. We are able to sell our meat now to China. I mean, the first country to do so. We're able to sell our tea, our rooibos, our wine. So already there's that movement towards that. So all we need to do, perhaps, as the continent, is to manufacture more products and sell them to China, not only take from them what is finished products.
Something else that was talked about a lot was dispelling this fear that China is trying to recolonize Africa. We've got a clip. Let's play it.
FOCAC refutes the view that a new colonialism is taking hold in Africa, as our detractors would have us believe. The progress that has been made over the last 18 years clearly demonstrates the tangible and lasting benefit of FOCAC to the people of Africa and indeed to the people of the People's Republic of China as well. The relationship that we have forged through FOCAC is premised on the fundamental and inalienable right of the African people to determine their own future.
China's investment in Africa comes with no political strings attached. China does not interfere in Africa's internal affairs and does not impose its own will on Africa. What we value is the sharing of development experience and the support we could offer to Africa's national rejuvenation and prosperity. China-Africa cooperation under the BRI is a way to action-based and results-oriented cooperation.
President of China, Xi Jinping, basically saying they're not going to meddle in Africa. How's that been received from other African leaders?
You know, you get a sense from all involved that there's a frustration, particularly from the African countries, because every time China makes an investment into the African continent, and then there's those words to say, well, the new colony is in town. Because Africa is so underdeveloped, and those perhaps who colonized Africa before are not doing much now. But when they see China does something, so they do talk. I think you get the sense that they're actually frustrated at this talk, which they blame it mainly from the West. And I think that's the reason as well why the co-chair, the outgone co-chair, President Ramaphosa, made it clear to say, so we know what we're doing. We know what kinds of agreements we are entering into. So these people are not colonizing us. Again, China is also very, very much aware. And that's why it's putting out there in public for all to see, to say, this kind of cooperation and help does not necessarily come with certain conditions. So we have voluntarily decided to work together as China and Africa because for the common purpose. That's why I think the theme was for the shared prosperity. So basically, all we are doing it to grow together. Perhaps because they have realized, they kept speaking about a market of 2.6 billion. Perhaps because they have realized that, Africa presents a 1.2 billion market, China a 1.4. So Africa mainly untapped, and there's huge opportunities there. China, a big market that needs to be entered.
Definitely. Africa, covers more than 20% of the land surface of the world, so it's a big market. It's richly endowed with natural resources. And, it's economically as well as culturally diverse, isn't it? But in terms of African countries, this sort of perceived standoff by other countries, is that why China is seen as a preferred, better bet in terms of a lending partner to grow economies here in Africa?
Let's perhaps look at the so-called Bretton Woods institutions, like your IMF, your World Bank. So if they are to offer you some kind of help, particularly, the issue of structural adjustments, the kind of conditions that come with that are really frustrating because they kind of direct you exactly what you should do. And you'd find that your conditions don't allow that. With China, it's totally different. So you sit down, you talk, you state your position, and then the China will just come in, and then it will be easier. And then from there, you'll see the tangible results. The 20 airports on the African continent that China has built is actually evidence of that. The rail infrastructure that it has built in many other African countries, of course, roads and so many other things. Yes. Okay.
No. So you didn't get a sense that there was any basis to shift the blame onto China for the debt problems here in Africa? Absolutely.
In fact, China is being hailed as actually the savior. China also gave another $60 billion over the next 3 years. And remember that when FOCAC was taking place here in Joburg, same thing happened. And they were able to give an account of what happened to that $60 billion. And then that gave, I guess, a sense of comfort to everyone to say if we are able to work together and if we have proper plans, we can be able to issue more funds, and then that's why they're able to do that.
Very quickly, I want to talk about Jack Ma. If there's any person's brain that you want to pick, it's Jack Ma's, isn't it? The Alibaba Group.
Absolutely.
He's, given globalization the big thumbs up, isn't it? Globalization continues to shape the world in an accelerated pace. But I guess the question is the benefits of globalization, and is it evenly distributed among countries?
Well, at this stage, obviously not. It's certainly not. It depends on who takes the opportunity and run with it.
Yeah.
Talking about that very man, Jack Ma, he only set up Alibaba in
19 years ago, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but now, the guy is one of the richest in the world, and his company is one of the biggest.
Yeah. I think he said he started off with 18 or 80, and it's now 75,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I think it's people like that, people who have ideas, people who are innovative. And by the way, Jack Ma is coming to the conference next month.
Yeah.
That investment conference the president has arranged. So you can see there is really, life and opportunities are for those who take them up.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. Go and have a rest, my friend. That was Mzwandile Mbeje, is our senior political reporter, give us an insight and, basically wrapping up the China trip of President Ramaphosa.